So I have been hard at work on God knows how many things. It's been a very long time since I've gotten to sit and just sort of make something, like a video. I have one that I've been working on for 3 weeks, which seems ridiculous because it's only a 14-minute video. Although it is technically one of my longest. But what I have been doing, basically when I can't sleep, or just between waiting for feedback to come back so I can carry on doing my actual work, I have been catching up on some comics I've been missing. So let's just do a rundown of what we've been reading lately. This is completely unscripted, which you can probably tell by the amount of times I stop and pause. Just for the hell of it, really. So, what have I been reading this week? Doomsday Clock. I finally read all of Doomsday Clock. That arrived, the second hardcover finally released in England this week. I say finally, I don't know if it released early in America. I know for another book I'm going to talk about, we had this problem here in England. But I read all of Doomsday Clock. I read all 12 issues in one sitting, and it was quite an experience. I do agree with a lot of people that I'm not sure DC needed to actually use the Watchmen characters, but I enjoy what Jeff Johns did with this story, and I think the only character that was really used a lot from the Watchmen series is Ozymandias, and then in the later half you do have Dr. Manhattan coming in. I had some questions during the first book, especially regarding the comedian. Yeah, there's probably going to be a couple spoilers in here, but because the issues have been out so long, I'm kind of okay just discussing some of the finer aspects. Like, the comedian shows up really early, and then it cuts to when he falls out the window at the beginning of Watchmen. And apparently Dr. Manhattan saved him, or something saved him and put him in the DC universe, where he hasn't really aged a day. And my immediate thought was, okay, we see him land here, he still has the smiley face button, but we know that his body was found and that the button was taken by Rorschach and given to Dan Draper in, like, the first issue of Watchmen, so how is that possible? And then by the end of the book we do get an answer to that, like, he's just thrown back into that moment where he's falling, so he was literally gone for a few seconds, if anything. Which I wonder if that kind of cheapens his death. Granted, I'm also somewhat playing the movie version in my head because I just sort of enjoy that Eddie Blake's last words in the film was just, it's all a joke. Actually, I think the movie is the only time we get to really spend real time with Eddie Blake, because when we start the book, he's dead. Like, he's just been killed. And everything we see with the comedian is through flashbacks. But with the film, because we see the assassination, we do spend a few minutes with the comedian in real time, if you get what I mean. So yeah, the comedian showing up was kind of weird, and at first I thought it was just going to be a one-issue thing, but then he did come back, and it's like, okay, you're not just going to bring him back for no reason. I did sort of enjoy Mime and Marionettes. I'm glad they weren't overused, and it did sort of add a few extra details to the Watchmen universe we hadn't seen before. Even if it's just, hey, this is one time where John didn't get rid of criminals, and we think it's because he knew she was pregnant. But then if you think back to some of the events of Watchmen, he doesn't particularly care if someone's pregnant or something. He watches Eddie Blake kill a pregnant woman, and he doesn't really think much about it. I mean, he makes a comment to Eddie of just, she was with child, and he turns around and says, you could have turned the snow to glass, the bullet into mercury or whatever. It's just as big a problem for you as it is for me. Which I found very interesting when I read Watchmen, and yeah, it was an open sort of thing here. It's not something I was expecting, so there had to be a bigger reason why he saved them. The main crux of the Doomsday Clock book, though, is I feel like it was Jeff Johns trying to get apart his feelings on the New 52 and Rebirth, the two he actually had a hand in rebooting. Because with the New 52, yes, he was one of the team members behind it, but it doesn't feel like it was his project. It feels very driven by Dan DiDio and Jim Lee. They definitely wanted a darker tone. Jim Lee wanted the armored look because that's what he enjoys drawing, which is fine. I'm not a big fan of Jim Lee's art, but I can appreciate the technical aspects of it. I feel like Jeff Johns was trying to get across the importance of Superman, and I know that sounds really stupid, but I think the number one piece of proof you have for that is in how DC markets the two characters, Batman and Superman. The perfect comparison is that they had their 80th anniversary issues and celebrations a year apart. So we had Superman's in 2018 and Batman's in 2019. For Superman, we had the big issue, the Action Comics 1000, which had God knows how many variant covers, because of course it had God knows how many variant covers, and the ending of the Peter Tomasi, Patrick Gleason run, which I love that run. If you're going to tell me to pick a whole run for someone to read, it's that one, because I think it does ground. It makes Superman relatable to those who think Superman is not relatable. But that was essentially what we got. There was one Funko Pop 80th anniversary Superman, which admittedly I love. I did try and track one down. I ended up getting two, one for me and a friend, and it is an amazing figure. I love like the flying motif because it almost looks Christopher Reeve-ish, but not, because I know getting that much facial detail to prove that it's Christopher Reeve would be quite annoying for a Funko. But then compare that to the Batman 80th. There was so much going on in the comics. I mean, yeah, Tom King did technically end his run during the 80th as well, but I think that was more DC not being too happy with how people were reacting to Tom King, which is a shame, because I rather like Tom King. I need to read the rest of his Batman run, because what I've learned is that with Tom King, it's better to read an arc in full. Like, I think maybe he should work in the Netflix model. The only exception I'd say is that I read the first 6 issues of Mr. Miracle before the second 6 were out, and I enjoyed that little bit, and it did want me to get the rest of it. So I was very happy when I got the paperback with everything in, and then I traded my paperback for the hardcover, which is absolutely lovely. I did sort of get annoyed at the fact that the hardcover was only available through direct markets, because then I had to find a comic shop here in England that wasn't Forbidden Planet that had it. And the reason it couldn't have been Forbidden Planet is just simply because I don't have a Forbidden Planet anywhere near me without spending at least 30 quid to get there. 30 being half travel, half food, and then some entertainment. Usually just in the form of getting a power pack or something, I don't know. But there's this whole section in Doomsday Clock of Manhattan realizing that the shifting timescale of the DC universe is always dependent on when Superman lands. And I like it. There's this really great line that Superman is hope and hope is the North Star of the metaverse. I really love that line because it's completely true. Even though it did sort of shift it so the JSA were the earliest superheroes, he still notes that it all depends on Clark's rocket landing on Earth. And I like that Dr. Manhattan is sort of understanding this all-powerful being that could do anything he wants, but the DC universe sort of confuses him because it's hopeful. It's never going to be as grim and gritty as his was, because it is superheroes. It's not the real world. In his world, he is the only superpowered being because of an accident. I did enjoy the exploration of the Superman theory. I mean, I wouldn't say I was very political, but I did sort of understand that. This is why I had trouble reading stuff like, what was it, Captain America then? Secret Empire? I had some trouble reading Secret Empire. I have to keep reading up a few things to wrap my head around the reasons why. But I did understand the whole thing with the Superman theory and the issue where Superman goes to comfort Firestorm, and they figure out how to basically undo what Firestorm did. And by the way, I love the fact that Firestorm got some attention. They try and figure out how to undo it, and they successfully do it, and they go back to Moscow to try and prove to people that it wasn't on purpose. And everything goes wrong, and the tank's running into, like, the glass people, and there's Firestorm freaking out because he can save these people, but he can't save them when they're shattered. It was genuinely emotional to me. I was really glad I read this book, And I'm glad I read it all in one go, because I could sort of absorb myself in the world. The only problem is that now I want to reread Watchmen, and I want to rewatch the HBO series. But I think Sky is taking it off the streaming service now, because they only ever do things limitedly. I am trying to find the steelbook for it, just because I like steelbooks, but I probably have to go for just a regular Blu-ray, because I can't seem to find anywhere selling the steelbook. Alright, so that was Doomsday Clock, with a lot of meandering. Next up, I read the entirety in one sitting of Superman Smashes the Klan, and oh dear lord, is this one of the best Superman stories of the past decade, if not longer. Zhen Yang does an amazing job here. I mean, he's basically retelling an old radio drama from the 40s that was about the Clan of the Fiery Cross, which was the stand-in for the KKK. And the whole point of that radio show was to educate children in who the KKK were, why you shouldn't really agree with them, why you should report that kind of activity if you see it. But at the same time, it had to be specifically worded so at no point would someone tune in and think the KKK were the good guys. Which I always think is really interesting. There's a great book about it. It's literally Superman versus the KKK, and the author's name has escaped my brain right now. But it's not that hard to find, and it's very orientated to children. But Superman Smashes the Klan is one of only 2 books that I can pinpoint the actual moment where I fell in love with it. The other book is also Superman related. It's Superman's Secret Identity, and I can pinpoint that moment where Clark, in the 2nd issue, where he's still a young man, but he's able to go and get a job in the city. He's talking about Lois, who obviously is not Lois Lane, it's just a Lois in that universe. And he's talking about her, and in the caption it just says, if I sound smitten, don't read too much into it, it's because I am. And it was just like, I don't care what happens in the rest of this book, I like this character, I like this universe. This is amazing, and I've fallen in love with this story. And with Superman Smashes the Klan, this happened again in the 2nd issue. I don't know what it is about the 2nd issues. I know this one's shorter, because Secret Identity has 4 issues, maybe 6? I don't know. Smashes the Klan only has 3. But in the 2nd issue, Roberta comes outside with Superman's cape to thank him for saving her brother, and hands it back because he'd used it to sling her brother Tommy's arm. And he literally says to her, you know, the funny thing about capes is they get damaged all the time, so my mom made me God knows how many of them, so I'll let you keep this one. And it just made me smile. And then there's like a scene where Roberta goes to sleep and the cape's on the end of her bed, so her mother takes it and makes her a jacket out of it. I love that. There's always this notion about pretending you have Superman's cape on your back as sort of a way of strengthening yourself, which I think is a really good metaphor. It's one I've used a few times when I have some really bad muscle pain. But that was absolutely great. And it's just a load of little moments like that. But I love how Yang mirrors how the Lee family feel being outcasts and being shouted at, being called aliens, with Superman and Clark especially learning his real origins and being scared of what would happen if humanity realized he wasn't human, he is in fact an alien. And it's just this idea, like, when he does eventually come out and say that he's an alien, even flying in front of them and shooting out laser beams, which apparently he hadn't really done at that point, they're scared of him at first. He comments that Lois is the only one looking at him and smiling. And it's how quickly people can turn. But he does win them back, mostly by doing right. And I thought it was very, very well done. I surprisingly really loved Lois Lane in this, even though she's a minor character. There's this whole thing she has with Roberta, where she gives Roberta a pen, saying, you know, if you ever want to become a cub journalist at Daily Planet, just like Jimmy Olsen, come by the office and we'll talk. And she gives Roberta a pen with the initials LL. And Roberta's thought is that it's her pen because LL, Lois Lane. And then the end of the issue, it's like, no, I did some research on your family when all this started, and your name is Lin Sen Lee. You're LL. And I was just so happy because it's always this big joke. Scott did a great video on it about the LL conspiracy of Superman. And just having Roberta be a part of that too was just really fun. So, what's the next book? Speaking of Superman, Superman Up in the Sky by Tom King. It meandered in places. I was very aware of how it was originally published. This is the book that got heavily delayed here in England. It was supposed to come out in April, and I got it last week. Pre-ordered through Amazon. I had myself a little drink to remember the struggles of getting that. So Superman Up in the Sky it's basically this young child who's a massive fan of Superman is kidnapped, and she's even carrying like a Superman doll. And she's sat there in like her cell in this whole other planet just thinking, I'll be okay. Superman will come find me. And Clark has this big debate about even leaving the Earth for any length of time to go looking for this child. But he does, because he's Superman. And it's him fighting across the galaxy just to find this girl. And I'd say that two very specific chapters that are standouts that tell you everything you need to know about Superman as a person, not so much an ideological figure, is in the middle and it's in the end. The middle is when he's at like a galaxy way station kind of thing, which oddly enough has references to the Invasion storyline, which made me laugh when I spotted it. And he just wants to talk to Lois. And you can see all these thoughts in his head of everything that possibly could have gone wrong for Lois without him there to help. And you can see it, that it's physically bothering him. He's shifting and he's like tapping his foot, and he just really wants to know she's okay. And when the phone call finally gets through, nothing's gone wrong. Lois is fine. Work's a pain in the ass. Perry's calling her from the other room, and she has to leave because she's got work to do. And after she's hung up, Superman's still there holding the receiver, and all he says is, I miss you. And I think that's amazing. I absolutely love that. The ending chapter is when he actually does go and find the child, and then it's the journey home. But it's the child's reaction to Superman. She has all these questions for him, like, who's your favorite Robin? And what's Batman really like? And stuff like that. And when they get back to Earth, she looks at Superman when he says, have you got no more questions? Because she'd gone silent. And she says, you're gonna ask me why I never gave up, or why I didn't ask why you came to find me? Simple. You're Superman. That's all I needed to know. And I thought that was great. Tom King does show that he has a great understanding of the character, and I'd love to see him do another mini-series. Maybe not so much in the Walmart fashion of how they released this, because I think that did sort of come into play with the weird pacing of the story, because they knew it had to be in like small increments for those Walmart giants, which I'd love to get my hands on one day just to see how it was properly released. I remember originally causing a bit of a fuss because Lois Lane gets shot in the head, but that was taken like really out of context. Like, I blame Bleeding Cool for a lot of it, where it wasn't real. It was one of Superman's worries, which I thought was really funny when I realized it when I was reading it. It's like, oh, this is the section that all that uproar was about. That's so stupid. But yeah, I mean, I have problems with Bleeding Cool anyway. They released an article like 2 days ago talking about DC's whole like 6 meters apart thing, and they're on about, did they forget Batman and Robin live together? Because the picture is Damian and Bruce 6 meters apart. And I'm sitting there going, but they don't live together. Damian moved to like Titan's Tower. He's with the Teen Titans, unless it changed in the last month or so that I'm not aware of. Which I don't think it did. Usually I have people who tell me these things, like I don't stay up to date with a lot of things. And I just tend to get like messages from people saying, hey, have you read the new Teen Titans? Because look what happens. Or, hey, I know you haven't read this, but here's a detail that might get you to go grab the book. And it's not so much that I'm not interested, it's just that I tend to read things in bulk, even the ones I get in single issues. I don't tend to read straight away. I have to wait till I have time to read them. So I end up reading a couple issues back to back. The only exception was when Tomasi and Gleason were on the Superman books. The only times I read multiples is just when I had no time to go pick up the single issue for a couple of weeks. But yeah, Superman Up in the Sky, a hell of a lot better than Bendis. Can we just put Tom King on the Superman book and let him find his feet? Because that'd be great, because I'm still not enjoying Bendis, and the more I was reading both Tom King's and Up in the Sky and Superman Smashes the Klan, the more problems I was seeing with the Bendis run. Just stuff in my head where I was going, yeah, Bendis doesn't do that, and that's fundamental. I specifically hate his treatment of both Clark Kent, not Superman, Clark Kent, and Lois Lane. But enough of the Bendis bashing. Next book, Batman Damned. Yeah, I remember the controversy about this when it came out, I didn't care. I've seen the uncensored images, still don't particularly care. There's a lot of debate of whether or not that scene should have been in the book. I read the book, in fact I read it last night, that's why it's still fresh in my head. And yes, that scene did sort of add to that, because it was him being vulnerable. I mean, he gets attacked by his own freaking suit in his head, and the fact that he's naked does sort of have that vulnerability to it. Think the first Alien movie, where Ripley thinks she's safe, and she's getting ready to go into the sleep pod, so she strips down to just basically her underwear, and then the alien attacks again. She is more vulnerable in that scene, and it's emphasized by the fact that she has no outside protection. She has no jacket that she can rip off if it grabs it or anything. She is alone, scared, and almost naked. With Batman Damned, you have that same thing there. That's not the bit I took issue with Batman Damned, though. I'm not the biggest fan of Libramejo's art, just mostly because I know he's trying to be realistic, but it really puts me off at times. It's really dark when it doesn't need to be, and sometimes that means I can't always follow what's going on because colours just seem to run together. I mean, it was a little bit more defined here, but just in general, I'm not a big fan of Libramejo's art. But it kind of works when paired with Brian Azzarello. The darkness does really fit, for lack of a better term. The main problem I had with the book is that they heard Black Label adult-centric and went, oh great, let's put attempted rape, let's put the infidelity of Bruce's parents, and let's just cap it off with Batman being dead. Batman being dead I don't have an issue with, because fair enough, you were sort of telling, like, his descent and realization that he's dead. I don't think spoilers were in there. I had spoilers going in, and I still got a lot out of it, because there's a lot of characters that show up. I was quite happy to see Batman play off John Constantine. I'm English, and I still don't even know how to say his name properly. I am not a Liverpudlian, I'm Stokey. But there's just details in that book that felt so unnecessary, and at the same time, it felt like it went too long and needed expanding upon. Like, I don't know what they were trying to do with Etrigan there. He becomes like some kind of rapper named J Blood, which I get, Jason Blood, but why is he some inner city rapper and he's Etrigan? Last time I saw anything to do with Etrigan, yeah, it had nothing to do with that. And I understand reinventing a character if it works, but this just didn't feel like it did. The stuff with Harley I thought was interesting to a point, and that's the attempted rape. That didn't seem right. I mean, I get it, she's missing Joker because she thinks he's dead, and she's covered in like scar tissue and stuff where she's almost tried to do the smiley thing, and then there's a cut on her chest, which I think is probably left over from Joker. It didn't look exactly fresh. I just didn't agree with what she did, because it doesn't seem right to Harley's character. I mean, granted, I'm a kid who grew up with the Batman the Animated Series, and I read Gotham City Sirens. I have the big omnibus upstairs. Just a couple of things like that, and I'm trying to think of the Harley I know, and just trying to think if she would do that. I mean, I haven't read any of the recent stuff just because I don't have that much of an interest in it. It just didn't fit. However, the Batman book I did enjoy, which I read directly after Batman Damned because I needed some eye bleach, Batman the Dark Prince Charming, which I really enjoyed. It felt like, when you break down its actual plot of Joker wanting to get Harley a birthday gift and the original one being lost, and then he sees like this big diamond is up for auction, so he blackmails Bruce Wayne into buying the diamond for him, and how he blackmails him is with this young girl who's supposedly Bruce Wayne's illegitimate child. It kind of felt animated series-ish, especially with Elena, the young girl. I really enjoyed this because I loved that it had this aspect on the fairy tale, hence the Dark Prince Charming. I thought it was so interesting, and it's definitely one to pick up. I think the author is French, I'm gonna guess. I remember when the first 2 issues came out, they were like a hardcover. I think a friend of mine had them, and they'd sent me pictures of them, but I did not manage to pick them up. Instead, I picked up the collected hardcover, which is huge. It's bigger than a deluxe. I would hazard to say that it's almost the size of an absolute, but it's lovely, and I don't think it's that expensive. About 18 quid, I think I picked it up for. But it's really good because there's all these subtle nuances between Bruce and the Joker, and the little girl is amazing. The twist at the end is great. It's the only one I'm not going to spoil, because I feel like less people would have read The Dark Prince Charming than they would Doomsday Clock, Smashes the Klan, Up in the Sky, or Damned. But that's one you should definitely check out. On my little pile to read now, I have 3 80th anniversary edition books. So I have Robin, I have Joker, and I have Catwoman. The Catwoman I have, because I know someone's going to ask, I have the 1980s Artogram cover. For Joker, I ordered the Jacques cover, and they sent me the Bermejo by accident, which feels really funny now. I do have the Jacques cover on the way, so I'm going to see if a friend wants this Bermejo one. And then I have just the standard cover for Robin, because I really liked that. Those 3 are to go. Because Owen won't stop telling me how good it is, Batman Universe, which... it's Bendis, so I'm sort of on the fence, but I flicked through it, and there's Batman with dinosaurs, and you can't go wrong with Batman and dinosaurs. I have the Absolute for the Authority to read, which looks really fun. I read the first 2 issues in there just to sort of get a feel for it, and I really liked Jenny Sparks just going in. I'm going in essentially blind, the same as I did with Planetory. That's about it. What have you guys been reading? I should just talk for about half hour about comics. What are you guys up to?